Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and with the unexpected death of the legendary actor Val Kilmer, we at the Arizona Roundup program have a special bonus program coming to you about the story of Tombstone and actor Val Kilmer. The program begins right now.
Hello, this is Stuart Rosebrook on Arizona Roundup at Sharlot Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona, and my special guests today are Boze Bell, the executive editor and owner of True West magazine, and Brad Courtney, good friend of mine, from Prescott, Arizona. Brad is the Whiskey Row historian. He's written a series of books on the history of Whiskey Row, the Palace Bar and Saloon and Restaurant, and also has been doing some extraordinary research on Doc Holliday. And we decided to gather together today on the phone as the former editor of True West and still the editor-at-large at True West magazine. The three of us have spent a lot of time thinking about Doc Holliday, Tombstone, real and imagined for many years. And we learned yesterday of the passing of Val Kilmer, who in the annals of Western popular culture, film, and literature, for many, he embodied the spirit of the gunfighter, gambler, dentist from Georgia, John Henry Doc Holliday. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to be here, sir.
Bob, I'm going to start with you. I think you've been doing research on Doc Holliday and Tombstone a lot longer than Brad and myself. And tell us a little bit about what your reaction was when you heard about the passing of Val Kilmer and his influence on the Doc Holliday popularity around the world.
Well, it is a huge loss, and it makes us all feel very mortal. I'm proud to say I got to meet him on the set in June of 1993. That was when Jeff Morey, who was the historical consultant to Kevin Jarre, who wrote that brilliant script. We have to give a great shout out to the Kevin Jarre script, because without it, Val would not have had the lines he had. But get this, I was doing a radio show in Scottsdale. I got off the air at 9, and I drove like a bat out of hell to Tucson and picked up Jeff, who was staying there, and we drove out way down to Sonoyta and under the Baba Kamari Ranch and up through a cattle guard, and there was a bunch of trailers there parked in a wash, and we got out, and Phil Reed was working on the guns. We went around it, came around, they were filming the scene, and that was when I saw both Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp and Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday. And my first reaction, I was so stunned because, as I later told Kevin, damn, the hats are right. I couldn't believe it had been so long. The hats had gotten so wonky in Westerns. I just couldn't believe the hats are just so cool. And, of course, Doc Holliday had one of the coolest hats. And I remember that my first reaction to Val is that he looked very pasty, and they'd gone to a lot of troubles to make him so pasty. And I thought, dang, they're going to some great length here to capture what we, think Doc Holliday is. So that was probably the most incredible scene that I have seen in my adult life, because I saw history being made, and I saw Val Kilmer in his prime.
Wow.
And Brad, do you remember, where were you living when Tombstone came out, and were you interested at that time in Tombstone and gunfighter history and law and order here in the Southwest?
It was kind of a side interest, and actually, I just moved. That year I'd moved from the Navajo reservation to Phoenix, and I was teaching in downtown Phoenix. But my memory of it is, I heard this movie Tombstone was coming out, and my dad went and saw it, and he came back, and he didn't know who Val Kilmer was. But he came back, he goes, man, that movie was fantastic. Whoever that guy is that played Doc Holliday, he was fantastic. He deserves an Oscar. And then, when I saw it, how I had to agree. And I found out, was it yesterday, the night before he died? I actually found out from a relative of Doc Holliday. Her name's Lindsay Bryce, and she's writing a historical fiction with Doc. And she was the one that told me. And, on Facebook, you see all these false claims that somebody died, and that was my first reaction. I had to look it up. But yeah, we knew it was coming, but it was still a shock.
Yeah, Val Kilmer, I think that I was talking to someone about it earlier today, and you look at the Tombstone and its importance to film and cinema and helping, I think, re-inspire and be an anchor in the rebirth of the Western. And I thought about the Batman when Jack Nicholson played the Joker and really stole the film. And I think that when we look back at Tombstone, great cast, the ensemble work, but there it is, Val Kilmer, every scene just chewing it up and just embodying the spirit of this, legendary character. And of course, anyone who's researched and written about Doc Holliday, and Brad, you've been involved with some frontline research with Bob recently about his life here in Prescott, trying to find the truth, the nuances to his real life. But when Doc Holliday appears for the first time in Tombstone, he's in Prescott.
Yeah, he comes to Prescott first, and here's a pitch. We, of course, most people know we found out where the house was sited where he lived, and we had a big old event, and True West was up, and Bob Bell was up, and we had just a grand time. We're going to do it again, and it's coming up. But the thing about Doc is he gave us and the writers a lot of raw material to work with, and he's so enigmatic. We still don't know a lot about him, so we can kind of be creative with the way he's portrayed. And Val Kilmer took that and just took it to another level.
So, Bob, you've written biographies on Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. What is it that when you sit down to write about one or the other, what kind of mood do you get into when you write about Doc Holliday versus Wyatt Earp?
Well, it's such an intriguing story, and the irony is that when the people that lived in Tombstone came back to Tombstone for the first Eldorado, and they did a reenactment of the street fight, as it was known at that time, they were appalled because that was kind of like ne'er-do-wells facing off on a side street in an alley, kind of like a Vegas card game gone bad, and they were just stunned that this was becoming such a seminal moment in the history of the town. In fact, John Clum was upset about it. He said, this isn't what this town is about. And so, in spite of that, it isn't all made up. That's I think the thing probably, Brad, that is so intriguing about this is that the local paper said he said, quote, "You're a daisy if you do."
Yeah, I know. You think that was written for him, but it wasn't. He said it.
That's actually part of the historical record.
Yeah.
So I think the dichotomy or the conundrum, I guess what it would be, is that here's this well-read Southern gentleman, mixing it up with these Texas cowboys, and that is just high octane juice, man. It doesn't get much better than that.
He's classically educated, in Valdosta, and he was the smartest guy in the room always, and he's always portrayed as that. And he had according to the movies, he was the fastest draw too, so he was like an invincible guy wherever he was. He couldn't be conquered in conversation or an argument. He was just he gave us a lot of raw material to work with.
And don't you think that the fact that he is always battling this specter of death with the tuberculosis, that also makes him interesting because he's very real, he's very human with this specter that he's always carrying with him, and it's as well as the mystery. And Bob, have you thought a little bit more about how Val Kilmer was Did you ever have a chance to talk to him after the role, or visit any of the, the show, the gatherings of the cast? Did he ever attend any of those?
I think he did. I was not there, and I did not talk to him afterwards. But the irony is, I was in Wickenburg for a show at the Desert Caballeros Museum, and I met his mother. She was this really forceful older woman, very attractive. And his mother moved to Wickenburg and married a cowboy. And I read an interview with him that, yeah, my mom got a cowboy. Just that kind of like ne'er-do-well, still playing Doc Holliday.
Interesting.
But that was surreal to be in Wickenburg and run into Val Kilmer's mom.
Yeah, I bet. And it's interesting is that I think right now when people think about Tombstone, obviously Kurt Russell is the star. You've got this great ensemble cast across the board. And, Sam Elliott as Virgil Earp. And we could go down through the list here of actors. Bill Paxton as Morgan Earp, Powers Booth as Curly Bill, Michael Biehn as Johnny Ringo, Charlton Heston as Henry Hooker, Jason Priestley as Billy Breckenridge, John Tenney as Biehn, Thomas Hayden Church as Billy Clanton, Stephen Lang as Ike Clanton, of course Dana Delaney as Josephine Marcus. She inhabits the role. She's incredible. And we can go on down through the list of some great Harry Carey Jr., Billy Bob Thornton. I mean, there's people lined up to be in the film, and we could go on and on with many other friends of ours that were our friends of True West Magazine and have continued to stand up. Forey Smith was in there, and Peter Sharako as Texas Jack. But I think when people think about Tombstone, well, you would think they would think about some like Kurt Russell. I think the first actor people think about is Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday. And I don't think that he went out of his way to do that, but his role was so iconic and so quotable and so believable. People walked away, and that's who they remember. And what are your thoughts, Bob, about when we're going to look back on the history of Western film? How important was Val Kilmer to help, springboard the Western forward in the early 90s when it was kind of on I'd say it was, Lonesome Dove had come out a few years before, and, Dances with Wolves. But I think Tombstone really, took it back into popular culture for a wide audience.
It was in many ways the Western that we knew, that we grew up on, was deader than a doornail, in spite of Dances with Wolves and
Unforgiven.
Yeah, but it just was so dead. And to give you an example, they premiered the movie, and of course they were rushing to get out because Kevin Costner's Wyatt Earp movie was going to come out soon, and it ended up in the spring. But they were rushing to get out, and so it premiered, I think, on December 3rd, something like that, out in Tempe. And I had my son with me, and at the time, he was like 9 years old, and just the Westerns were the most uncool thing to him, which irritated me. I almost disowned him at the time. But I had to take him. I ended up with him, and I said, okay, now I want you to be in there. I want you to be good. And just behave, okay? And that it was part of a radio promotion that was on KSLX, so I had to bring him, and I had to, perform and all that kind of stuff. And so we're in there, and the movie finally starts, and the lights go down. My son's sitting next to me; he's 9 years old, and all of a sudden, the wedding scene opens up, and Powers Booth walks forward with the aces and eights, or the cards on his boots, and I hear this little voice in the darkness go, "Wow."
That's
and
cool.
I looked down and I leaned over to him and I said, you're watching a Western. He said, this is amazing. And so I kind of had a clue that it was going to be really good. Now, one thing I do want to say, and I'd like to know what Brad thinks about this, but, you can't discount Dennis Quaid, who played Doc Holliday in the Kevin Costner version. And for my money, he looked more like Doc Holliday. He went on a forced diet. He was emaciated. He looked like Doc. But the most incredible thing is he didn't have the script. The script isn't, every line out of Val Kilmer's mouth is just golden. I mean, I know. Let's have a spelling bee, and then he spins. I mean, it's just, and you got to give a lot of credit to Kevin Jarre for that.
Yeah, and I saw a thing on Facebook like yesterday. Everybody was quoting. All the men were quoting Tombstone. Just like every other day that we quote Tombstone. That's how quotable it is. But yeah, when I saw Dennis Quaid, I'd already seen Val Kilmer, and I didn't know much about Doc at the time, and I was comparing Dennis Quaid, who's one of my favorite actors, to Val's performance. And I think our mutual friend Constable Ron Williams says it best. He goes, Val Kilmer played the Doc we want him to be, but Dennis Quaid played Doc as he probably most like. And I think that's a pretty good description.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to break. And Brad, I'm going to say you're our huckleberry at the moment. We're going to come back and talk more about Val Kilmer, Tombstone, and Doc Holliday. Thank you very much. We're going to say a few words about our sponsors. Since 1995, Helkin & Horn Ad Agency has helped local businesses stand out and succeed. From print and radio to websites and social media, their talented team crafts your brand's message and offers a plan to get it out into the community. Want results backed by 30 years of experience? Visit azadagency.com today. That's azadagency.com today. Helkin & Horn, where their slogan is Be Known. For over 45 years, Blind Brothers Arizona has been the heart of window style in Prescott. From blinds, shutters, drapes, they custom design and install with expert precision. Tailored to you, whether for your home or office, trust the name locals rely on. Visit blindbrothersaz.com today or call 928-776-1845. That's blindbrothersaz.com at 928-776-1845 for a free consultation. Blind Brothers Arizona, the original since 1979. Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Sharlot Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. And my special guests today are Boze Bell of True West Magazine and Brad Courtney, the Whiskey Row historian of Prescott. And we're talking about Tombstone, Arizona. We're talking about the film Tombstone. And we're talking about the passing of the great American actor Val Kilmer. I'm your huckleberry. Now, that is a line that has been on T-shirts, hats, quotes, memes, and that's a line that no one forgets. It's about that film, and we were talking a little bit about Val Kilmer's style as an actor and how he delivered those lines and a great script. As my dad would always say, it starts with the word. And Bob, tell us a few of the lines you think Kevin Jarre wrote that will define that Western forever.
Well, I think that "I'm Your Huckleberry" is probably the most seminal line. And when I was doing research on the biography for Doc Holliday, the earliest I could find was it's Stuart Lake's. I'm sorry, it was Walter Noble Burns' Tombstone, 1925, 6, 7, right in there. And he uses the quote there. That's the earliest I could find. If you do look it up, you'll find that it is an actual term from that time. Now, recently, there's been an online addition to the myth, and that is that it actually is "I'm your hucklebearer," as in, somebody who carries a casket. And I have a problem with that. I think that's adding on to the myth. I've never seen that in the contemporary evidence. Have you, Brad?
No, the same thing. I actually read that today, and it came from the Walter Noble Burns book. Yeah, I've heard that discussion, but I'm hard of hearing, but I hear I'm a huckleberry. It's pretty clear to me. And, people still debate it, but I think it's really clear. My favorite line is, why, Kate, you're not wearing a bustle. How lewd. That's my favorite line in the movie. And I've used it a few times.
Yeah.
Well, and I love the fact that soon after the announcement of his passing, all of this conversation started all over social media, and I have seen a variety of people even almost go into like a Zen conversation of what "I'm your huckleberry" means, and it's ready for a philosophical essay, I think, Bob, in True West magazine about what does "I'm your huckleberry" really mean, and the layers of that line. And I think that it's very proverbial, and I think that that's why Kevin Jarre's script stands up so well, and that so many actors, after reading it, signed up to do it. I think that if you see a film where you have that kind of enthusiasm in terms of acting, of ensemble, cast work, they also have a great script. They've got great production. We know there was a change in the direction, and Kurt Russell played a great role behind the scenes with the new director. And but it reminds me of great ensemble westerns. Like, I think Stagecoach is a wonderful ensemble western. I think that The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and Lonesome Dove as a miniseries, an ensemble cast that, it's a rarity, but the script is so good. The actors don't have to work hard at rewriting their lines. They can embody that role. And I think that was a freedom that was gained with that script with Val Kilmer.
Well, as I like to say in our meetings at True West, that was worth a meeting right there. We do need to do that. Thank you, Stuart. We need to do a piece on "I'm Your Huckleberry," and it might even end up on the cover. What does it really mean? Why is it so seminal? I think that's a great piece for the magazine. And I also want to say that I see Tombstone rising in the classic category. It wasn't when it came out, it did really well, but it was always kind of an also ran, the second tier. I just never, it wasn't called a classic. And now I think it's in the top 5. I mean, and I'm talking about in the zeitgeist, in the emotional tenor of the culture. I just feel it rising. It just has now with his passing, that almost gives it. We're almost in the Greek god zone here.
Yeah, and I agree. The more people talk about it, the higher it goes up in the rankings. You always see who's the greatest basketball player, Michael Jordan, blah, 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 and it goes on and on. And Tombstone is right there. And wasn't it actually the original script for like 3 hours? Is that
no one had timed it. And we did an interview with Kurt Russell, and he said they were getting ready to film it, and no one had timed it. So they actually sat down and read it out loud, and gave the beats for the timing. And it was like 3 hours long. It was way too long. Now, what I just cannot believe hasn't happened is that someone hasn't taken that original script, turned it into a series, a Netflix series, and run 6 hours of it, and spread it out a little bit and really relish it. I just can't believe somebody hasn't done that. I've heard that Amazon's about ready to remake Lonesome Dove, and that makes me cringe because I just think they're going to ruin it. I hope they don't. Love it to death.
And there were rumors that they were going to remake The Wild Bunch, and I think that they can go back and try to remake, as they have generationally. There is this great filmography of Wyatt Earp and the gunfight at the OK Corral, and all through the last 80 years, there's been a pantheon of Western films that has attempted to bring us this story. And I think that the reason the Tombstone has succeeded so well And I love My Darling Clementine. I love John Ford's take on it. I like it more than the Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas 1950s CinemaScope look at the shootout at the OK Corral. But I like the fact that this film, the film production, because it was such a surprise. I when I watched it, I also saw the production team and the cinematographer. They were students of Charlie Russell. They were students of Frederick Remington. And noticed really quickly the bandanas, the color that they put on the cowboys and the Earps. And what did you call it one time? The gang fight of Cochise County.
Yeah.
And they identify them by their sashes, by their bandanas, their colors. Yep. And to me, it really was, I could see the Western painting, like Monty Walsh with Lee Marvin and Jack Palance, which is an overlooked Western, one of my favorites. Some people, it's not theirs, but I love Monty Walsh because I can see the cinematographer and the director painting on the screen and bringing those colors forward like Charlie Russell did and Frederick Remington, many of the other classic Western artists, including yourself, Bob. The use of color from the one-dimensional to the screen, I think, is very evident, and it draws you into the film, just like your son seeing those boots, those little details that grabs you right off from the front.
Yeah, I think you hit on something kind of important, and that is on a new idea, read an old book. And that's what happened, is that they did go back to Charlie Russell, and back styles had evolved into that brown, the outlaws white. In fact, that's one of the things that Wyatt Earp, in my estimation, is they were all the outlaws are in brown, and that's just old school. And the thing that Tombstone had going for it was the cowboys were just like landlocked pirates.
That's exactly right.
And they reinvented it. And the other thing, which I was talking to the producer of Tombstone, and he said the script said that the town was brand new. And so that was a revolutionary idea, because all the Westerns had sunk into this idea that if you're going to go to a Western town, that it's old and decrepit, and the saloon door barely hanging, and it's dusty and dirty and down. And the script said, no, the town's brand new. And so they went into Mescal out in eastern Arizona there, and they rebuilt the set, and all the buildings, the Grand Hotel, the Oriental, Crystal Palace, are all brand new. And now, what the irony is that the next movie to go in was The Quick and the Dead with Sharon Stone, and they came behind the Tombstone crew and made the buildings old again. They went through it, peeled the paint off. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
That is. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, Bob. We're going to come back and we're going to talk more about Val Kilmer, his career, and the Tombstone effect, and Doc Holliday. If you're looking for the store that has everything, Prescott True Value Hardware might be your answer. From having that part to fix that leaky faucet to decorating your garden with charm, they've got it all, and a friendly face to match. For over 30 years, they've proudly served Prescott, supporting neighbors like you and local nonprofits along the way. Visit Prescott True Value Hardware. They're more than just a hardware store. If you're looking for the store that has everything, Prescott True Value Hardware might be your answer. From having that part to fix that leaky faucet to decorating your garden with charm, they've got it all, and a friendly face to match. For over 30 years, they've proudly served Prescott, supporting neighbors like you and local nonprofits along the way. Visit Prescott True Value Hardware. They're more than just a hardware store. Looking for a fun educational outing? Sharlot Hall Museum isn't just a history display, it's an experience. From the Prescott Indians Art Market to Sharlot's Cellar, living history adventures, author presentations, and lecture series, there's something for everyone. Uncover the past and create new memories today. Visit charlottehallmuseum.org to see our full event lineup. That is charlottehallmuseum.org. Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Sharlot Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. Our special guests today are Bob Boze Bell of True West Magazine. He's talking to us today from Cave Creek, Arizona, and my good friend Brad Courtney, the Whiskey Row historian of Prescott, Arizona. And it is snowing here today in Prescott. It's snowed on and off, and it's early April, and you never know what's going to happen up here in the mountains. And I think that when you go back to the way that Tombstone was produced and Val Kilmer's role, one of the things I remember about it is they specifically went out of their way to show Doc in Prescott. And obviously they had to take, we don't know what Kevin's 3-hour script would be like if it was a mini series today. But I think with the research that Brad, that you have done on Doc here in Prescott, and the further research that was written and done in True West Magazine, and historians continue to mine his life, I would think that if a miniseries was produced, that they would find inspiration in Tombstone to really broaden that story before everyone arrives in Tombstone. What do you think, Brad?
That's when I started my Doc Holliday research, it was just going to be a chapter in the book I was calling Prescott Tombstone Connections, but it just grew, and then we did the plaque thing, and the interest was just sky high. And people ask me, what did Doc do to deserve a plaque in Prescott? And I go, nothing. It's what he does now, And we're talking about Val Kilmer. A lot of the attention he gets now is because of Val Kilmer. Yeah, but in the movie Tombstone, they take the incident that was said to be in Fort Griffin, Texas, where Doc stabbed a guy named Ed Bailey, who in the movies I actually contacted Frank Stallone and talked about, when Val Kilmer kicked your ass. he didn't want to talk about it. But it's actually, it's inferred in the movie that it happened in Prescott. And some people have taken it here as it actually happened, but it's actually something that's historical fiction. There's no proof it ever happened. Kate herself said it never happened. We're real close, Stuart and I, geographically to the Pioneers' home where she said this. She said it reads good, but it just never happened. And I tip my hat to her because it made her look really good. But it's a great scene in the movie. Val Kilmer makes Doc look like a ninja warrior and kicks the guy's butt that played his brother played Rocky Balboa. But it's a good scene.
And Bob, let's talk a little bit about Big Nose Kate and the actress. We talk a lot about Dana Delaney, who I think is brilliant in Tombstone, and she gave us a great interview a couple years ago in True West Magazine. I think the actress that gets overlooked and probably needs someone needs to interview her is Joanna Pakula, because they cast her. She's from Poland, and so they found an Eastern European actress to play Big Nose Kate, who's from Hungary, and I think her role and the actress herself gets overlooked, and maybe those are just the little nuances that when we look back at Westerns we love, that the producers and the directors just took one little extra step to make a role more believable. It's imagined, but what do you think? What are your thoughts about how Joanna Pakula played off of Val Kilmer in Tombstone, Bob?
Well, I think it was. I thought it was genius, and you nailed it, because all good movies have that element where somebody took an extra step. Maybe it wasn't on the printed page, or they just keep pushing it and taking it further. And that's perfect. She's this. The West. This wasn't about girls from Alabama and from Iowa. That are from Europe. And that goes back to his sophistication. It's just a brilliant stroke. That movie is full of soul. Now that we know how a near miss that it was, that almost derailed. It makes it. What's that old saw in Hollywood? Great movies aren't released; they escape.
I love that. Well, and the interesting thing about I've been watching the headlines the last few days and how which newspapers and media outlets are announced Val Kilmer's passing. And I saw one that was the online obit from the Los Angeles Times. and they chose star of The Doors and Top Gun, Val Kilmer dies. And so they chose two films which they identify him as the star or a leading man. And they don't, and I don't remember the subhead, but in the headline, they just mentioned those two films, which I think is interesting because at first I was like, hey, they left out Tombstone. Why didn't they mention Tombstone? But when I think about his role as Doc Holliday, in many ways, his character is a mixture of the bravado of those two characters, right? The characters from Top Gun, in which he plays the nemesis of Tom Cruise's hero, as well as the character of The Doors, which is kind of this bohemian, he inhabits Jim Morrison. So what Brad and Bob, what do you think about that? Those roles that then informed his career, and what we think about Val Kilmer.
It could be. I don't remember what came first, The Doors or Tombstone, but I remember watching him as Jim Morrison. He was just phenomenal.
Yeah, he was in a film, a David Zucker film called Top Secret, and what I remember about that is surfers in California pulling out shotguns. That's what I remember about that. I think his first role. I was talking to Paul Hutton, who's real good friends with David Zucker, and he was telling about that movie. And I said, oh, yeah, I remember that movie. Then comes Tombstone, and then I was on KSLX, and we were taken over to the Cine Capri, which is long gone and missed. And we got an early morning view of The Doors. And I was pretty stunned that, and I'm a snob because I'm a band guy, so when people are supposedly playing drums in movies, I'm just really hard to please because, I've been in a band for a long time. And, but I got to tell you, Val Kilmer, he learned 50 Jim Morrison songs and could sing them flawlessly.
Yeah,
that's just a little insight into his work ethic, that he didn't take these jobs lightly, and he went the extra mile.
Well, let me throw a little film history in here for you on Val Kilmer. And it's 1984 where he's the star as Nick Rivers in Top Secret. 1986, The Iceman, Top Gun, right? Then Willow, right? Which is a cult favorite. If you love that kind of Hobbit and Lord of the Rings kind of feature, he's Mad Mardigan in Willow. But here's one for you, Bob. Here's some homework for all of us. 1989, Billy the Kid, Val Kilmer, right. William Bonney, right?
Yeah, that's Gore Vidal's Billy the Kid.
And really? Wow.
Yeah, and I'm not this is weird, but I'm not a fan of that. And he played him as a kind of a yuck and a duck. He did a good job, but it kind of lost me.
Right.
I'm not a fan of Gore Vidal's Billy the Kid, so I'd have to pass on that one.
Right, but 2 years later, he is Jim Morrison in The Doors. So it's 1991 that he plays Jim Morrison. So he's played the Iceman in 1986. The Doors, he's Jim Morrison in 91, and 2 years later, he's Doc Holliday in Tombstone.
Well, I'll be damned. So I had it backwards. For some reason, I was picturing of being on the radio, but you're absolutely right, because then it was 2 years later that I got the call that I could go visit the set and drove to Tucson. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's funny how memory flags when you get old.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, that was the first one.
That was 19.
Go look it up, old man.
Yep.
But I think that it's interesting to look at the evolution of his character and how actors will move back and forth between there'll be a leading man and there'll be a supporting actor. And Val Kilmer goes through a lot of different phases there in his first real 10 years as a leading man. And to decide to be part of the ensemble, where he has obviously established himself in the star power for that role. So he's, in some ways, as an actor, he saw this role, and I believe it had to have come from the fact that he he read this script and said, "I want that role. I can do that, and better than anybody else."
I can't remember who it was. It might have been Henry Park for us. Someone was interviewing him or someone close to it. He said that Val Kilmer was channeling John Carradine from Stagecoach. Have you heard that?
But I can see it. I can visualize it right now.
Yeah, that was his model. I seem to remember that being disclosed. And that would make sense because John Carradine was so cool in the Southern way, in Stagecoach.
Yeah, and again, if you have to, for me as a film historian, I would say that Stagecoach is the beginning of the renaissance of the modern Western. Everything begins and ends with Stagecoach in 1939. It's a bellwether year for film, for cinema around the world. And the tightness of the direction of the casting in Stagecoach. Kurt Russell is a student of film. He grew up, under the tutelage of great directors of the studios, and he knew what he had. And I love the line in the interview in True West magazine where Kurt Russell's interviewed, and he says, "I put my marker down with Buena Vista. Disney had given me everything in my career, and now my name was on it, and we were going to bring that film home." It says a lot about, and people don't give Kurt Russell enough credit for being such a student of film, a little bit like Ron Howard, both of them child actors, but they learned from the ground up from the greatest filmmakers in Hollywood.
Yep. Yeah, it showed. Well, it's a classic film, and I think it's going to rise even higher now. And I'm just waiting for somebody to take that film and do the original script, and that would be a fabulous series.
That will be very, very popular, I would think.
Well, I'm going to go around the table here. Brad, you're first here before we wrap this up, and we're going to come back and talk more about Western film on another podcast with both you and Bob. But as a Doc Holliday historian, where do you think your research is going to go, and do you think that Val Kilmer is going to continue to influence people's interest in the real Doc Holliday?
Well, I could tell you what happens. So I got a text from a friend the other day, and she was sitting at the palace. She goes, I'm sitting with a artist who draws Western history characters. And I go, "That's great. And she goes, she's drawn some pictures of Doc Holliday." And I go, "Oh, I'd love to see it." So I waited. She sent me a picture, and guess who it was? She sent me a picture of Val Kilmer. And I didn't want to say anything like that, but that's the way we think of them. It's just, I kind of compare it to Marshall Trimble said something to me one time about how movies can make us look into the truth. And in my master's thesis, I watched Geronimo and American Legend with Wes Studi, and that's what got me interested in the whole thing. And Val Kilmer's that guy. He's the guy. Well, what was he really like? And hey, Dennis Quaid's close, but like Bob said, he didn't have the lines that Val had. But Val's an amazing actor. When you think about Jim Morrison, you watch that movie, you go, you forgot that it was Val Kilmer.
Right. Well, Bob, you I don't know if you saw the Doors live, but you lived while they were becoming famous, and you have helped make Doc Holliday famous in your career as a writer and editor and publisher. Why don't you take us home and give us some surreal little reflection on Doc Holliday and Val Kilmer and Tombstone, and why it's important for all of us to know who Doc Holliday really was.
I have to draw on an artist, Picasso. I think it was Picasso who said, "Art is the lie that shows us the truth." And I think that Val Kilmer's portrayal in Tombstone is one of those seminal moments where he portrays death, death with dignity, which we're all kind of dreading, but we're attracted to it. And Wyatt Earp is the life, and it's such a powerful metaphor for life, and such a beautiful film in the sense that it's so poetic and almost, the myth is, it just puts it up there with the Greeks. That's how powerful it is. And what a coda for Val Kilmer that people are going to be comparing all the Doc Hollidays, and there's going to be plenty more of Doc Hollidays, especially if Brad Courtney has anything to do with it.
I got some people in mind, yeah.
There's going to be more Doc Hollidays, but they're all going to be compared to Val.
Well, this has been a great afternoon with you, Bob Boze Bell and Brad Courtney here on Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Sharlot Hall Museum, talking about one of our adopted mythic heroes who actually lived and walked the streets of Prescott, Arizona in 1879, 1880. Doc Holliday, we tip our hat to you, and we tip our hat to Val Kilmer, who brought the legendary Western man to the silver screen and brought his name around the world. And we're going to get back here with both of you soon and talk about Western history and the real and imagined West.
That's a wrap, folks, and thank you for being a part of Arizona Roundup. And thank you, gentlemen cowboys, Stuart Rosebrook, Bob Boze Bell, and Brad Courtney for your reminiscing, your storytelling, and your actual acquaintances with the story of the legendary actor Val Kilmer. I must say, my name is Stan, the Radio Man, and I am the leader of the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. I've been in the broadcast world for many years. This has been one of the finest programs that I've had the opportunity to produce. It's a classic, and I'm grateful for all the people who made it possible, particularly those of you in the Prescott community who helped sponsor this program. For those of you in the community who are encouraging us to build this new radio adventure, which will tell people about the Western way of life and a little bit more about the mile-high cowboy city of Prescott. So thank you all very much, and we hope that you'll come back. We have this adventure every week, and we would love to hear from you. So go to the charlottehallmuseum.org, charlottehallmuseum.org. Let us know how we can entertain you and inform you and educate you even more, and look around for all of the opportunities that are there. Let Stuart and the staff know just how much you appreciate the program. I would be grateful if you would do that. That's the cowboy way. You always tip your hat and say thank you when the work has been well done. And today it was just that. So all the best to you. We'll see you next time for Arizona Roundup. And bye for now.